Hello and welcome to the Warp Shelf. I'm Frank Duran.
I'm Deshaun Vasquez.
And today we're diving back into the AFI Top 100 Movies of All Time. You know we've been doing a couple of these every so often. So now we're talking about probably one of my favorite movies, like one of those movies that influenced me a lot, and it's kind of sad that it's up here in the 90s for me, but I understand, I get it, but we're talking about Goodfellas. Goodfellas is one of those movies that as a young filmmaker and a young kid, it spoke to me so it just inspired me so much, it really changed how I wanted to make movies and stuff and make videos and how I want to approach those things. And so it's funny to go back to it now. But we're also going to be comparing it. So we got Goodfellas right here. So any of these AFI Top 100 movies, on the Warp Shelf, we decide what goes on your Warp Shelf, if it belongs there or not. These two belong here. We already got them right here. I got Goodfellas and I got Casino. This is a 4K remaster of Goodfellas.
Oh, is that your old DVD of Casino?
Oh yeah, it is. Oh yeah.
Because I remember you letting someone borrow that and then they just never gave it back.
I finally got it back. I got it back and watched it finally the past couple days. So it's my first time watching Casino, which is wild because most people have told me that yeah, you should have seen Casino by now. And I'm like, especially because I'm such a big Scorsese fan and Goodfellas fan that people were like, well, that's a big gap. And I'm like, yeah, even though I've, watched thousands and thousands of movies, there's got to be gaps somewhere. And
yeah.
Casino was one of them. And now I've remedied that. But today we're mainly talking about Goodfellas. But we do want to get into
Casino because they're often directly compared, and it also sort of is a lead-in into a couple of works from Scorsese that almost work as a thematic saga.
Yes,
whether intentionally or not.
And I mean the comparison is very apparent. It's the only person missing is Ray Liotta from Casino.
Liotta.
It is Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci again in both movies, and Martin Scorsese directing. So it's an obvious comparison, but we'll get into why they are compared and what that means and what how if they compare why Casino isn't on this list and Goodfellas is. And I think, and Deshaun, you can and I just came off Casino. You can say, I'm going to say it right off the bat. I think it's because Goodfellas, you can connect with it almost right away. You connect with the characters, you connect with Ray Liotta's character right away. Liotta, sorry. You kind of go along with his journey even as a kid, and it kind of grows up with it. Yeah. And I think Casino is more of an epic sort of,
it's for sure a matter of scale.
Yes, I think so.
And because you have different POVs and we're trying to widen it out, there is sort of a harder in. I do understand what you were saying when you were first watching it, because you were messaging me as you were going along about it's tough for you to connect at this beginning because it seems like they're throwing so much at you. And there is kind of the first 20 minutes of Casino does feel kind of info dumpy because they need to get you to the end of just everyone's seen a mob movie, so we don't really need to go into that. But not everyone knows how a casino is going to potentially work and how they worked at the time. So we have to really get into it. We have to establish the different POVs. We have to get a lot of it through. And in fact, this movie, when it was originally screened, had a lot less narration to it, but it lost people in the beginning, so they had to add more.
Oh, interesting. That is interesting. I do think that it's good to bring up that these two are both books too. It's Wise Guy and I don't know the name of the Casino book, but it is a true story, kind of thing.
But the interesting thing about Casino, and to be honest, I could speak as to why it doesn't it's not as tight as Goodfellas in a few places, is the book for Casino was kind of being worked on around the same time the screenplay was for the
Oh.
movie, because it's the same author as Wise Guys, who also wrote the screenplay for Goodfellas with Scorsese. They worked together again for this.
Interesting.
But it was sort of a simultaneous project where they were working on the book and the movie at the same time, and one was kind of influencing the other, kind of like 2001, where it's just kind of a singular project with two different iterations.
Yeah, but I think, so there's some behind the scenes with Goodfellas that, like, he took the Wise Guys book and Martin Scorsese was like, we can shorten things up, we can lengthen things out, we can cut things out completely just to get that feel that he was going for. And I kind of worry Casino is almost more clinical in its kind of storytelling than Goodfellas is. That Goodfellas is it's kind of I mean, both these movies are cumulative experiences. It's not just like, oh, the first 20 minutes I'm in love, like, which, I mean, that first 10 minutes I'm in love with Goodfellas. But I feel like Casino was one of those things where it's more of an overall feeling for the whole thing. And so is Goodfellas, where it's more of that, like, how when you walk out of Wolf of Wall Street, you feel like you took drugs. I feel like Goodfellas, you feel the paranoia of the like the whole empire falling apart. And Casino, it's more of like, it's like sort of hard to explain because it's another descent into madness, but it's more of a descent into just
it's
drugs,
more like it's focusing on a different
kind of each other's lives more than it is. Yeah. I agree. It's like, it's one of those things where they kind of get into each other's lives too much, like, and that's what goes wrong.
You could almost view like it starts from Mean Streets. You could almost argue like the mob movies that Scorsese has done is sort of like an ongoing saga that tackles a particular version of that, or a beginning, middle, and end. You start with Mean Streets, which is about a bunch of kids who are sort of on the cusp of that sort of life. Goodfellas is about what those kids grow up to be.
Yes.
Casino is how big the scope of like the roots are with the mob, and to the point where you have them like controlling the casinos in Las Vegas, having politicians in their pocket. Yes. And you could almost argue, even an addendum to that The Irishman is sort of an epilogue.
Yes, kind of like what happens at the end of these lives.
Yeah, what's the end of it all?
That's interesting. That's a great point. Is that like it's kind of like a life timeline thing for all of these.
Yeah.
And yeah, The Irishman is that great, like, what happens to a mobster when there's nothing left,
Yeah,
like,
because structurally The Irishman is a lot like those other movies, but what's interesting about The Irishman is that it's just so cold.
Yes.
Like, there's not, that glamour is gone in The Irishman. It's just kind of sad.
Yeah, like all the scenes with them talking on the phone, like, if you compare it to scenes in Casino and Goodfellas when they talk on the phone, The Irishman, they're just talking. It's Al Pacino, Robert De Niro just talking on the phone, having the whole scene, and hang up. Goodfellas, smash, smash, smash a phone. Casino, they like keep trying to like trick the FBI while they're listening in, sort of thing. So it's all rushed and planned out.
It's like the enticement of it, what the life actually is, how deep it goes, and what you're left with. If you want to talk about it in like 4 parts, it's like, whether intentional or not, kind of like just one big saga.
Yes, exactly. And definitely different time periods here, because like Goodfellas starts with the 60s and goes into the 70s and ends at the 80s, and definitely like the Casino is very 70s. Like, it's very like what happens at the 70s, and it's funny because like you see the mob kind of end in the 80s of Goodfellas. They kind of like shrink down, and they make a lot less, and they like hide better. And Casino is very much that, like, the 80s has come, boom, here's the FBI, it's over. Like, it's very interesting that they kind of both have the similar timelines, but you see it from different perspectives of that. Because like Goodfellas, it's like they know they're being chased, but they don't have any up on the cops the whole time. And I think Casino, they have the up on the cops pretty much the whole time. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
they have people inside and they know
And
they're
Casino
being
kind of like
watched.
stretches it, like pushes it as far as it can go. Like Casino is a lot more about excess, I think.
Yes, exactly. And you can tell that by even the lighting. I would say the casino's lighting is very high key above their heads. They're all haloed behind their heads with light.
Mm-hmm.
So it's supposed to show off that like casino lighting, you know, like very
Yeah.
bright, you know,
I
you
mean,
don't
it
know what time
opens. The
of day
movie
it
opens
is.
with an explosion. Goodfellas would open with an explosion,
did,
and it has like that fucking beautiful like Saul Bass opening credits too.
yes.
You're like, damn, all right.
I did think I think my first off-putting part of Casino, other than the info dump at the beginning, was that intro, because just the Robert De Niro floating through the air through the flames, I was like, what the fuck am I about to watch? Like, you know, like
Which was
where,
parodied in Deadpool 2 of all
yeah,
things.
right. And like Goodfellas has that amazing intro where it's like, I've always wanted to be a gangster. But it's funny because I love that scene, not just because for what it is, but because of narratively, it starts the movie off with the thing that ruins their lives. You know, like with the, it's like it starts with this massively brutal scene of them stabbing the guy in the trunk and
Mm-hmm.
dumping his body. But in reality, that's the moment that ruins them. And I think that's really great.
That's the
like
first
narratively,
domino.
you know, like is that's the real thing that gets Joe Pesci killed, you know, like, and it like gets everybody kind of sold out. And it's just, it's wild that that's how we start the movie. And then we go directly into his childhood and like talking about how he's always wanted to be a gangster and what he did. I also think, so I was talking about connections with Goodfellas and Casino, and I do think that the kind of immigrant story we're telling here with Goodfellas is easier to connect to than Casino's kind of just like, here's a bookie, and
because they're
he's
both
rised
outsiders
up.
to the mob, because neither are like
Made
Italian.
men, yeah, they're not made men, they're not
but
Italian.
but they push it further because you get into like Henry's childhood and the like,
Yeah,
and how he kind of just started hanging around these people and he kind of earned his way up.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think it's important when we talk about mob movies to talk about the power in them and why you know, why the mob rose to power in the first place, and why, you know, people are obsessed with mob movies, because, you know, people love The Godfather, people love Goodfellas, people love Casino. It's like mob movies are big time movies, you know, like, and there's not a ton of them, you know, per se.
The most
but
annoying
it is a
people
genre.
love Scarface.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's an important thing to talk about because it's usually first generation or second generation immigrants. You know, like these are not just people coming over on the boat. These are people who realize that their parents were fed a false American dream, and they have to make it on their own. You know, like that is the usual kind of ingredients for a mob movie, you know, like, because if you're looking at Al Pacino's character in The Godfather, it is definitely like, I can change the mob to be better, slash I can, you know, take care of my whole family, you know, instead of just relying on you know, my Sicilian roots, you know, like, and it's like, and Goodfellas is very much like, my father's a sucker for doing 9-to-5s. I can do this and be you know, a bigger man, you know, per se. And I don't think it happens as much for Casino, so that's where I maybe don't follow it as well. You know,
it's
like,
also a good comparison to make between The Godfather and Goodfellas, because you have like this, the Goodfellas and the Goodfellas. I combine the two.
The Goodfellas.
The Godfather is very operatic.
Yes.
And Goodfellas is a lot more grounded. It kind of reminds me of like Apocalypse Now versus Platoon.
Yeah.
Like one is very heightened and very almost esoteric to its advantage, and the other is like grounded. It's sort of like, you know, more of a dramatized version of what it is, as opposed to someone with more experience. You have Wise Guys as a book that's, you know, an account of what actually happens. And you have something like Platoon, where Oliver Stone was a Vietnam vet.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's I always loved the story of Mario Puzo. He wrote The Godfather, the screenplay, and like, after his book, and like he but he never wrote a screenplay before. And I always loved the story that he went to a screenplay class after The Godfather, and the first thing on the list is watch The Godfather to find out how to write a screenplay. And he was like, what the fuck? Like he was just like, wait a goddamn minute, like like he's like, wait, I didn't know what I was doing. And I think that's interesting, like a book writer going into a screenplay, and that can go wrong in so many ways. We've seen a lot of movies that are written by the actual authors that just don't go well.
Yeah.
And then you have things like The Godfather, or even Goodfellas or Casino, like
Sometimes you have even rarer instances where you have the author of the original work actually directing the adaptation.
Yes.
Which is Hellraiser and Exorcist 3, and that's the only ones I can think of.
Or you have, I think one of the best examples of this, and this is so outside of what we're talking about, but Princess Bride is one of the best examples of that, where the guy did the book and then he did the screenplay, and it's kind of like the screenplay answers questions from the book and they kind of work interchangeably. Like, it's one of those things where you can't just see the Princess Bride movie and then be like, oh, I don't need to read the book, because the book is so good by itself and does other things.
You say you can't, but most people have.
Yeah, most people have never read the book. But I would, guys, if you're going to get anything for this podcast, go read the Princess Bride book. It is worth it. Absolutely.
There's a fundamental connection between the Princess Bride and Goodfellas. It's all connected.
It's all connected. But okay, so let's kind of get into Goodfellas, because I think that it comes down to that, it's a story you can connect with. As a young kid, it's like, it's funny because I feel like Goodfellas is a weird watch, because it's like a sad tragedy, but in a lot of ways the guys in it think they're in a comedy. Like I'm not saying the actors, but like the characters themselves feel like they're in sort of an up and up comedy more than they are a like sad, tragic, fall out of grace. Like it is,
which is an honest take on like getting kind of wrapped up in that sort of life where you have nothing to really worry about. Like, money isn't an object to you. You can control people's lives.
Yeah.
Which I think in turn also gives people, every single time one of these movies comes out, it gives people the wrong interpretation, as if these movies are trying to glamorize the life because the movies are fun to watch. Just like, no, it's showing the enticement of it, despite it eventually falling apart.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I feel like Scorsese goes hard on Wolf of Wall Street for trying to be like, this is how badly it can fall apart, even though inherently worse things happen in Goodfellas and Casino. Like, it's like nobody fucking dies really at the end of Wolf of Wall Street, or of the main characters. They just all go to jail. And it's like he tries to show off how much things fall apart, because I feel like he has heard that criticism, like he has heard that maybe Goodfellas and other movies he's done kind of glamorize that life, when reality he's just trying to show that these guys were having fun, they were. It feels
like The Irishman was a direct response to that, just in its tone.
Yeah, exactly. But one of these things that I do love about The Godfather and Goodfellas is that, I'm Italian, and I grew up, with my Italian side of the family. And like, so a lot of what's happening in the movie, like family wise and the people around them, makes so much sense to me. And just like, I've seen these people, I know these people. And one of the things that stands out in this movie, and I don't think there's a little bit of it in Casino, but like the food. The food is so fucking important in Goodfellas, like it's almost like a narrative device, like of like what he like even when he's crumbling at the end of the movie and like worried that he's being chased down by the FBI, he's still worried about his sauce and he's got to keep it stirring and make sure it's good, like, and I think that that's just like part of it is that like even in my Irish household, it's like it was always all day what you were gonna eat, like what's at the end of the day, what's like what we're building to, like so like we'll it's one of those things that like I think that food is such an important thing to Italians and Irishmen and like and to the life that like that's an important part he brought to this and a realistic part of this.
Also, fun fact, cutting garlic really thin doesn't liquefy it. That's not how that works.
No, it doesn't work like that.
But it does make it easier to cook, and it's very good if you do it that way. I've done it that way with an actual rosary blade. It's tasty, but that's no. The garlic doesn't just melt.
So a little bit of play there. Yeah, I think that that's one of those things that's sort of realistic here, and that's where I kind of connect with Goodfellas and even The Godfather, and even The Irishman in those ways that like the food is so important, like even in these situations where they are, killing people, they're plotting things, like they're still like, well, where's the sandwiches? Where's the Coca-Cola? Where's the, like, where's
my
food?
bread with my wine, which turns into like a cheap French bread with some grape juice.
Right. It's wild. I do think that there's a lot of realistic bits in this, and that's what kind of humanizes these characters for me, and why as a young kid I was so like, oh god, yeah, this is like real, like
it's an example of like what you can potentially use when you choose to go bigger.
Yes,
it honestly doesn't. It's not unlike Knives Out versus Glass Onion.
Interesting. That's an interesting comparison. Like,
because that was something we had brought up when we had talked about Glass Onion. That like I preferred Knives Out overall, and it mostly comes down to like how fleshed out the characters of like the entire family feel. They feel each like real people, whereas like when you get to Glass Onion, they feel a little more archetypal.
Yeah,
and not as specific.
And I think that happens here with Goodfellas, comparing it to Casino, is that, you see what type of character Robert De Niro's is, like in Goodfellas. You kind of like see that he's, handing out money, he's making things happen, like, and just wants to like make good with his friends and family. And same thing for like, for Ray Liotta's character here, and I feel like in Casino it's a lot more just like general bad guys, in a lot of ways, like there's no like it's like, because Robert De Niro's character just wants to make money, like the whole time, like there's no real like other motivation than you're fucking with the money, which is true of some people, like that's,
and there is a lot of like
go for
ego, and
yes,
like
there's a lot
again
of ego.
How big can you get?
But I feel like Joe Pesci's character in this, I mean, you see him in Goodfellas, you see him grow up, like you see him kind of get to place he's going to be, but kind of right off the bat in Casino he's a fucking psycho, like, and
okay. I do get that, but honestly I actually prefer Pesci's performance at Casino just because it's so fucking entertaining the entire time. It is definitely based on like everyone really thought Joe Pesci was funny in Goodfellas, so we got to really ramp up the Pesci in Casino. But god damn it, every line that comes out of his mouth in Casino makes me laugh.
Yeah, right.
I will sometimes, like, with my friends who have seen it, will just go out of nowhere, you motherfucker, you.
You motherfucker, you.
Or that bit where he's watching the cops with the binoculars. Peekaboo, you fucks, you.
Yeah, it's like, he is good in Casino. Let me be serious. Like, let me be fair. Like, he's
But
very
I get what
good.
you mean as far as, like, characterization goes.
Characterization, it's very much just like, he's bad news to Robert De Niro's character there, and then he shows up and he's bad fucking news, like, and even if he's like a friend, like, and I feel like in Goodfellas, there's more to like know and kind of, you know, get used to
It's
and
more
kind of
personable.
empathize with. Yeah, more personable. Because it's like, and that happens, you know, with you know a lot of. I feel like a lot of Goodfellas is that there's a lot more characters you can believe than say the casino, which is very much, you know, bigger than life and epic, you know, like
Yeah.
trying to
Which is
seeing.
ironic considering like they're both based on actual events. And from what I can gather doing a little bit of digging, it seems like Casino was actually truer to life to what they were based on than Goodfellas was.
Yeah, Goodfellas is very kind of like condensed and very much from Ray Liotta's character there.
Liotta.
Leota. He that I forget the name of his character there.
Henry Hill.
Henry Hill. Okay, so Henry Hill is based off a real guy, and the book was based off testimony from that guy. You know, like he was telling the story. Turns out a lot of what he said was fucking lies or just stretching things. Does that make this not entertaining? No, not at all.
No,
like, you know, like
not a narrative film is not a documentary.
Exactly. So it's like one of those things where, yeah, it might not be as true, but does that make it any less? No, absolutely not. And because it's still from his perspective, you know, so it's kind of just like, all right, you know,
but
like
but that's like the only points, because I've joked about it before, because I've shown these movies not maybe back to back, because that's a long day of movie watching, because they're both
that's almost
one's
6
pushing
hours.
3 hours and one is 3 hours. So, but I've shown it to people like relatively not too long after the other, and it's interesting seeing how they feel, and they seem to sort of be on more on my side. Just like Casino has the more entertaining Joe Pesci, but Goodfellas is the better movie, but also Casino has Joe Bob Briggs, so that's my bias.
Yeah,
did you catch that when you got to that, actually watching this?
Yeah, you're just
He's
like,
the dipshit's brother-in-law to that fucking
and they fire him.
politician.
Like, I was like, wait a fucking minute. I was like, wait. I saw it and I was like, wait a fucking minute. I know this guy. Like, I was like, one of those moments where I'm sitting there looking up on IMDb. I'm like, wait a fucking second here. Like, I was like, wait a minute. So I do want to like point out that the casting at the very beginning of the movie of the kid actors, I feel, is perfect. I feel like the little Joe Pesci, the little Henry Hill, is amazing. I think that it perfectly ages up, and it's one of those like perfect kid castings that you don't see in many movies. And it's like sort of hard, you know, when they kind of jump to being an adult, and you're kind of like, that's not exactly that kid grown up, but it feels that way here, you know, like it definitely.
Or sometimes they draw attention to it and end up kind of making it worse.
Yeah,
looking at you, Looper, which is a great movie, but I could have suspended my disbelief that Joseph Gordon-Levitt was going to grow up into Bruce Willis. You didn't need to give him prosthetics. You just drew attention to it more.
You're just like, please calm down. We don't need to go this far. Like, but I feel like that's one of those like those things that you're just like, that's perfect. Another little thing that I think is funny about Goodfellas that you know Casino does too, but like Martin Scorsese is known for it, is actually using zooms, you know, like actually zooming out from a scene and revealing the scene, which, you know, me and Deshaun went to film school. They tell you don't fucking do that. They tell you don't zoom because your eye doesn't zoom, so why zoom? But
and often you need to use it carefully because it sticks out.
Yes,
it needs to be appropriate. And so you can see someone like Scorsese using it to pretty good effect here. Kubrick would also do it sometimes. Like, I remember there are like straight up like zoom outs in like A Clockwork Orange.
Yes, exactly. And I feel like he does it here to reveal a scene, like when they're when the restaurant owner finally gets in business with the mob and he's writing those checks, they kind of zoom out to reveal that like everyone's running around selling shit around them. And it's usually your reveal zoom, you know, like it's not just like out of nowhere or something like that. It's to show the scope of what is going on. And I feel like that's a very appropriate use of zoom, but I think it's funny that Scorsese's out there just breaking film rules, like, and being like, whatever, I do what I want, like I'm one of the greatest, fuck it, like. Another thing that I think is really great, just like on the production side, is how often practical lighting is really used here. Like, it's interesting how often you see the source of the light, and that's the only light in the scene. Like, and it almost creates a neo noir look, like, especially when they're burying the bodies out in the woods.
It's just all red.
It's all red, and like, and it's only from the car, and it's several of those scenes where it's just like, the lighting comes from one place and it's used to like heighten the drama and like the kind of weirdness of what's going on, because what we're dealing with here in Casino and Goodfellas are literal villains. Like, I feel like that's kind of narratively, like, these are not good people. We empathize with them, like, we go along for their story, but in reality, these are literal villains, like literal bad guys, doing fucked up shit. And like, and I think that that's sort of what he tries to accomplish with the lighting there, is to be like, hey, this is fucked, even though it's fun, like we may be playing a rock soundtrack in the background, but like, this is not good shit, like, and I think that that's, if he's not coming out narratively and saying it, like, he's coming out with the lighting and the setting and what's going on.
Scorsese's always been interesting about his music too.
Yes.
In his movies.
Yeah. Casino too. I was just like, when like the music plays as, what's the name of his helper who plays one of the Pixar characters?
Don Rickles' character.
Don Rickles' character. Thank you. Don Rickles, when he comes up with the gun and the music's playing, and then as they hand over the gun, the music goes silent, and then he takes the gun, and then the music starts up again, like, just to be like, this is a big moment where like he's kept his hands clean, per se, and now he's taking a gun into his hands, like, sort of like a big kind of like stop of this rock music and then back into it, and you're just like, okay, all right. Like, but I mean, Goodfellas, the soundtrack is iconic and just incredible. I mean, everyone always talks about using is it Loretta as the reveal scene for everybody being dead in the car, and the kids seeing the car, and like, that is just,
and I always think of like the Sid Vicious version of Byway for the credits.
Yeah, right.
Which is like super interesting.
It is really interesting. I do think it's funny because like, I feel like Goodfellas is sort of, Casino, he's kind of experimenting more than what the ideas he has in Goodfellas. And I think one of those, other than the music, is narration. Because I feel like in Goodfellas, it's Henry Hill until his wife comes in and she starts her narration, and it almost comes out of nowhere. Like, you didn't expect to hear her narration in a way. And like, and I do love that, because you kind of like hear her perspective of what she thought of him, not just like, not just like seeing what's on her face and letting the scene play. You kind of like hear why she finds that attractive, like what she's thinking in those moments. And I think that that's interesting. And then Casino, they're just like, let's do 3 people doing different narrations, even back to back. And you're just like, hold on, like, you're like, well, wait, hold on, this is too many, like, like, and it's one of those unreliable narrators in Casino, like, where all 3 of them are narrating.
They all have their own point of view. They're each like criticizing the other, like they're getting details wrong. They don't understand the perspective.
And 2 of them are dead by the end. So how are, like, narratively, how are they doing that narration, like, sort of thing. But like, because in Goodfellas, it's like him writing the book, like, sort of thing. Like, that's what it comes across as. Like, the narration is him writing the book. So when her narration comes in, you're kind of like, oh, this is her putting in her 2 cents into the book, like in Casino, it's very,
I also see it in Goodfellas. I also also see it as like the testimony for the entire life, because there's like
Yes.
that fourth wall break at the end where he's looking directly at the camera. It's like, now it's all over.
Now it's all over. As a young kid, I mean, you could check out my old YouTube channel. It's like I loved that fourth wall break. Like I loved the talking to the camera. And a lot of other movies do it, but like Goodfellas was one of the first ones I saw that they did that, and I was so like, I was just floored by it. And like I have a whole short film that I did in high school as my like capstone for high school. That was just a guy meeting a girl at a bookstore, and they put
you're talking about Whoa Man?
Yeah, talking about Whoa Man. And it's like one of those things where it's like that moment in Goodfellas. Like I did mobster movies, in high school and stuff like that, and I was definitely influenced by Goodfellas, but it was almost more influenced by Guy Ritchie films, like that. It was more, there was like the whips and the freezes, like that sort of thing going on. But I feel like Goodfellas, I mean, Goodfellas definitely influenced Guy Ritchie. I feel like there's, Rock and Rolla, where they're talking to the camera, is absolutely just taken from Goodfellas, and trying to like embellish on that and keep moving, and I think that's super interesting, to see kind of the influence of Goodfellas on filmmaking, because like everyone loves Scorsese, like they take little things and they sprinkle it throughout, and I think that Guy Ritchie's, there's so many movies of his that are obviously taking an influence, and you're just like, all right, not just Rock and Rolla, which I know a lot of people have not seen, but you should.
It's interesting that like public perception of Scorsese is altered, mostly because everyone keeps trying to fucking drum up drama with asking him about Marvel movie shit. But it's interesting that there's like, and it's the same way with Christopher Nolan, like the perception of the man versus the actual man's like attitude. The whole like, oh, Scorsese only does mob movies, etc. It's like, one, no, he doesn't. He's done plenty of other movies that have nothing to do with the mob. He's very versatile, and he's also not as much as a snob as you guys want him to be. Just because you're insecure about people criticizing the MCU.
I do feel like that, like the TikTok he has with his daughter that he's been doing a lot of. Not his granddaughter, right? It's his granddaughter he's doing those commercials with in the TikToks, and like those really like show you him in a lot of ways, like the person, and I feel like that's kind of important, and I feel like it's happened with Christopher Nolan recently with the people finding out he likes the Fast and Furious series, like I feel like a lot of people always were like, oh, he's a snob, he makes snobby movies, like, and then you hear that he's just like, yeah, I love all the Fast and Furious movies, and I actually have like thoughts about the mythos of these movies and like how a watch order of the Fast and Furious like series, and you're like, the fuck, you're like, wait a fucking second, what,
when the DGA, the Directors Guild of America, has their own podcast called The Director's Cut when a new movie is screened, and they usually bring on the director or some sort of filmmaker to come and talk about it, and they have another filmmaker interview them. They did one where Nolan was interviewing Edgar Wright when Baby Driver came out. I'm like, that's a fucking conversation.
Yeah, right. You're like, damn, like that's sick as hell. Like, and of course, Nolan loved Baby Driver. You're just like, of course, it's all his favorite things. Like it's just all the good stuff put together. But I do think it's important to like be like, Scorsese loves these immigrant stories. He loves these descents into madness. He doesn't love
he's also
the mob, like it's not like that's his.
And as far as
thing.
Accolades are concerned, it's not like he's one of those directors that they're continuously just like pushing him forward as the only filmmaker that exists. Like we forget how long it took Scorsese to actually like win some Academy Awards,
right? Or be accepted at all, like it's one of those things that like, yes, everyone's always like, yeah, but what about Raging Bull, like and you're like, yeah, but that was a couple movies in, like that was not just right off the bat he's making Raging Bull. Like there was a bunch of movies before that.
Everyone always talks about like, Raging Bull, Mean Streets, etc. I want to hear people talk about some of the ones that I never hear people talk about. What about Age of Innocence? What about Silence?
Yeah. Exactly.
What
Or
about the color of
who's that
money?
knocking at my door? Like Boxcar Bertha.
What about his remake of Cape Fear, which fucking rules?
It's absolutely one of those things, and I feel like even you look at all his movies, and it's like these movies that are not mob movies, like, yeah, the big ones, Casino, Goodfellas, Gangs of New York, Mean Streets, like, yeah, The Departed, like that's what he's remembered for. But you can't forget things like Shutter Island, or or Hugo, or Wolf of Wall Street, like
Killers of the Flower Moon recently.
yes, exactly. It's like, yeah, he's the king of the mob movie, but does that, does that negate everything else? Absolutely not. I feel like the same thing happens for Francis Ford Coppola. Everyone just kind of remembers Godfather, and you're like, yeah, but Apocalypse Now,
and the conversation.
Like, yeah, you're right. You're like, come on, let's be real. I am excited for Megalopolis. I've heard some mixed things, I am excited.
Honestly, the mixed reception to it makes me more interested,
right,
than either just like wholly negative or wholly positive. I'm like, okay, what this tells me, because people annoy me, and I think there's a real lack of nuanced conversation, is that it's challenging and people don't know how to feel about it. That makes it more enticing to me.
Yeah, exactly. So Goodfellas, one of the things that people bring up all the time is how many fucks are in this movie, are derivatives of fucks. There is 321 fucks in this movie. That is up there with some of the highest swearing movies. That is up there. But at the same time, it's sort of part of the language, like it's just part of it. So like I feel like that is, and it's kind of the way they are. And as a person who uses fuck as an adjective, I feel like, like it just kind of works. It is kind of the way it is. I do think Casino sometimes will not swear as much, but will use it to bigger effect. Like, you motherfucker.
You can always sort of like immediately like smell the difference between like swearing or that type of language as part of the dialogue or part of the culture. It's just part of how they talk. And the sort of like, we're trying to be edgy, so we're swearing, which I'm taking shots at some contemporary TV writing, where it sounds like they sound like kids who are swearing when their parents aren't around for the first time, and they put too much emphasis on it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's one of those things where you could swear like an adult, or you could swear like you don't actually swear that often in real life.
That's why something like It Chapter 1 never bothered me. Because I'm just like, oh, that's kind of how I talked to my friends when no one else was around. Like, we were swearing like sailors as a kids when we were just hanging out in the neighborhood and like doing stuff.
Yeah.
It was just when we got home that we would just tone it down.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I grew up and it was like I got in trouble for saying crap around my mom, but now it's like I try not to swear about my mom because she definitely is like, Frank, but it's just the way it is, it's just the way it is. I think it's just part of the authenticity. I can't say
authenticity. That word like fucks me up too.
Of this movie. One of the other things that I feel is very authentic for this movie, and isn't captured in many other movies, is how brown the 70s were. Like how just there wasn't psychedelic colors everywhere. It wasn't just bright colors. It was brown. Like
people like bring the same thing up about the 80s. Like just like the 80s wasn't this like pastel fever dream. A lot of the times it was just wood paneling,
exactly. And I feel like this movie kind of nails that look, especially when they go to the bar where they get your shine box. Like that bar is so brown, it's wild. Like you're just like, god damn. You just look around
and like Karen being like showing off her new apartment and it looks so gaudy now.
Yeah, right. You're just like, god damn. Like it's one of those things where it's funny like how well they nail that down instead of trying to like be like, it's romanticized, like it's the 70s was psychedelics and rainbows and fun, like no. Everything was plastic and brown, like that's the way it was, like but but beyond the aesthetics, I think one of these great things about this movie is the slow descent into not just madness, but like kind of losing uh joy, losing what makes you happy, like sort of thing is what happens in Goodfellas. One of the main examples is Ray's
Leota.
laugh, like at the very beginning, is so big and hearty and like and wild, like, and by the end it's barely there. Sometimes he's doing the laugh just to make people feel better, but you could tell he doesn't feel that way. He's not as loose, not as having as much fun, like is very just that he kind of just loses his laugh throughout the movie. And I think that that's sort of that's a, first off, just more I miss him as an actor. I feel like, like I absolutely miss him as an actor. And I feel like that's one of those little details that somehow he's able to keep up with the one of the GOATs, Robert De Niro, like where he's, Robert De Niro is viewed as one of the greatest actors of all time. And I think for good reason.
He had to fight for the part too. That's the interesting thing. Like Scorsese wanted him from the jump, but the producer like didn't really think he could like carry off the charm. He knew the menace of it would be there, but he didn't think he could be charming. And it didn't really convince him. This was brought up because I watched this movie again with commentary, because I hadn't seen it with commentary yet.
Oh, nice.
And the producer talked about how like Ray Liotta came up to him one day at a dinner and just talked about, look, I know you're on the fence about me. I swear to you, I can do this.
Nice.
He's just like, and he's like, I just admired the balls that he actually came up to me.
I mean, that takes some serious balls. That really does. Like, I think he's absolutely fantastic in this movie. I think it's his best movie, hands down. I don't know if you can say it's Robert De Niro's best, because I feel like he has more involved roles in other movies, kind of a side character here in a lot of ways. But I feel like this might be Joe Pesci's one of his best. Like I feel like this is. There's a lot of good Joe Pesci. Don't get me wrong. I think that it's hard to choose which is Joe Pesci's best. I do think he is fantastic in this and is able to bring this like ferocity and madness that like actually shows on screen. Like, and
I would argue, even though I had said that like I prefer him in Casino just because he's more entertaining, I would probably say his best performance is in The Irishman. Like there is a menace to his performance in The Irishman in a way that there's not in Goodfellas and Casino.
Okay.
In Goodfellas and Casino, it's the like, oh, this dude is wild. He's a wild card. He could just go off at any moment. In The Irishman, he's played a lot more low key, and it's scarier.
Yeah. I feel that. I think that is, it's kind of one of those things where Joe Pesci he's kind of almost Jokerish in this, where it's just like wild. You don't know what he's going to do next, sort of thing, because he'll do anything, like and like finish the fight no matter what. And I think that is very true of some small Italian men. Like I feel like that's a very like, they might not be scary and imposing when you look at them, but that they might chop your head off and leave you in the desert. Like that is, like that is Joe Pesci's vibe, is that like, he might not be the tallest, most intimidating looking motherfucker, but he will kill you, like he will.
The short complex, I say, only having 2 inches on Joe Pesci.
Yeah, it's not like we're short kings here, like like. But I've also heard that from people. They're like, Frank, I wouldn't fight you, and I'm like, you shouldn't, like it's not that I'm a scary person, but I will finish the fight, like, and I think that is something I sort of connect
that's
with.
It reminds me of a Tom Segura joke where he's just like, I can't fight, but I'll fucking bite your nose off.
Yeah, That's perfect. Like you're just like, yeah, no. It's not about if you will win the fight. It's about how you will leave the fight, like
Yeah.
sort of thing. Like, but I think that there's so much to love about Goodfellas. But it is interesting. I said earlier that like these characters think they're living the life, they're having such a good time, they're living the life as it's a comedy, but you can kind of see as everything starts to unravel around them, as things go wrong, like and Joe Pesci's character, how it goes from being just like, oh, he's kind of crazy, like he threatens that that store, that restaurant owner, to being like, killing that man for making a joke about his
Mm-hmm.
shine box, like, and it's just kind of that like descent into so much, and it's like,
And also like killing kid just because the kid stood up to him.
yeah, right. That was it. I do love that that's one of the guys from The Sopranos and stuff, like,
Yeah, Michael
like
Imperioli.
yeah, like I love that little bit there. But I think that like that shows, like that he's just a wild dog, in a lot of ways,
Mm-hmm.
like it doesn't matter who's fucking with him. It's the end, like, and you're just like, ah, shit. Like,
and the moment like he's gone, Jimmy, Robert De Niro's character, starts to become exactly like that, just in a different like sort of tone, just like that paranoia seeping in.
Right,
Getting
that
rid
he's
of
got to
people
take care of
left
these
and right.
people.
Like that fucking scene where he tries to get Karen to go in the store and she like sees the people watching is terrifying.
It is terrifying because it's one of those scenes that, if you're watching from the outside, he doesn't actually do anything, like he doesn't threaten her, he doesn't do anything, but it's that little bit of like him not wanting to go with her, him just kind of pointing around the corner, that is just scary. And you can tell
people argue that it's ambiguous. I don't think it's ambiguous at all.
No,
not at all. Especially if you actually like listen.
No,
like the fact that everyone stops in their tracks when she's like in front of the store, and you can hear the people talking about like, oh, block out the windows. And as soon as she shows up, everyone's like, shh.
Yes.
You're like, that's not ambiguous at all.
No, it's not ambiguous, because that's the other thing about this movie, is they're always walking together. Like that is this movie. Like if The Irishman is people talking on phones, this is guys walking together down hallways, leaving restaurants. Like that is this movie. It's epitomized by when he takes her into that restaurant through the back for the first time, and she's impressed by it, everyone knows him and all that.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much these guys walk together. So for that one scene where he doesn't want to walk with her, you're kind of like, okay, something's fucking wrong, like, because we all walk together here, like we all stand together.
Yeah.
And
plus there's that look on his face when she drives away, like that, like irritation.
Yes, right. Yeah, it's ambiguous because legally it needs to be ambiguous, like for him to get away with it all. But like, it's not ambiguous, like you're just like, no, not at all. But I think that the reason why this movie's on the AFI Top 100 list is it's not only 3 really good actors, but the whole cast is fantastic throughout the entire movie. There's no weak links. There's no somebody standing out.
Don't have as big of a presence as you think when you watch it, because they're focusing on other characters. Like Paul Sorvino as Paulie is so good in this too.
Yes, I do love Paulie. And Mary's favorite character, this was her first time watching Goodfellas, which I don't know how that happened. It's one of my favorite movies.
How?
And I watched it. I've watched it so much, but she must have just missed it. So, and it's funny, Paulie was her favorite character. She was like, that's, I like Paulie. And I was like, that's funny. But also it was funny. She was like, wait, is Paulie dead? And I'm like, no, Paulie's fine. Like at a certain point in the movie, I was like, no, Paulie's fine. Everything's good. Nobody kills Paulie, like, don't worry. But yeah, I thought it was funny that she had never seen that too. So it was like a double feature of Goodfellas and Casino, and she had never seen him before.
And Paul Sorvino actually, he talks on the commentary about how he didn't know how to feel about Goodfellas when he once it was done, and it was screened, like he thought initially that he was terrible in it because actors.
Yeah, right.
He thought he was bad in it. He thought the movie wasn't very good. And he had everyone around him being like, "No, you're insane." Even his daughter, Mira Sorvino, who's an actress too,
yes,
was just like, "This is the best thing you've ever done. You're insane."
Yeah, you're insane.
They said it took him some distance from it, like the first few days after the screening, to like realize that like, holy shit, this is actually something special. I was just overwhelmed by it and couldn't like take it in.
Yeah, and I think that not. So I was saying why it deserves to be on this list is that like the cast is there's no weak links. It's an amazing. The soundtrack is incredible. The filmmaking alone, some of the shots, just blow your socks off as like a film lover, but one of the things about this movie, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, is the cumulative feeling of the movie, because it's not just like, scene to scene to scene. It's how you feel as you watch it, at the whole impact of the movie as you walk out the theater. And I think that's important here because some movies just don't have impact, like they're kind of just nothing movies, and it when you watch it. You're kind of like, a nothing movie, I'll probably forget about this, but I had a good time, but this is the impact it has on you as a viewer. It mounts, and it eventually kind of boosh you out at the other end of the movie, and you're kind of like, shit, that was a film, like, and that's how, that's
also
why
one
I
of those ones that, despite how like violent it is, will still like unite people.
Yes.
And be entertained. I was mentioning before we were recording that I've been listening to Mark Millard's interviews with like comic book industry veterans and stuff, and one of the people he talked to was Chuck Dixon. Nice. Chuck Dixon, like prolific writer, like helped crafted like Nightfall and No Man's Land, etc. He's the creator of Bane, and he's on the conservative side politically, and he talked about how like no matter what side of the spectrum you lie on, everyone loves a gangster movie.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. It's like, yeah, it can be violent, but like there's a lot to love, like, and why, and a lot to connect to. And I think that's where Goodfellas kind of prevails over Casino. I'm not saying I didn't like Casino. I feel like the info dump at the beginning is rough, but I feel like once we get into his interpersonal life with Sharon Stone and his wife, you're kind of like, okay, who's
fantastic in that.
I get this, like, yeah, she's fantastic in this. Really just brings it all. And I think that once we're kind of like in the groove of him trying to like sustain this job at the casino, like is where the movie really takes off and drags you in and kind of brings you along for this ride. Now, I do think that they try to do at the end of Casino like the Godfather ending where everyone's kind of whacked off, and it's supposed to be, but that Godfather, that takes your breath away because it's almost like, wow, I can't believe Michael did this. When Casino, you're kind of like, well, I saw this fucking coming from a mile away, like you're like, this wasn't going to end good. Like this, nothing about this was going to end well. And like, I feel like even with Goodfellas though, you want him to end well. Like you want, like when they kill Joe Pesci, you're almost in Robert De Niro's corner where you're like, they killed him. Like you're like, God damn, like even though he's a terrible person, you're kind of like, God damn, they killed him.
But he's just so much fun. He's just a little guy. He's just a little guy.
And I feel like that is huge. Like that's the difference. There is like like
it's interesting the effect just shifting a POV can have in the way you like empathize with the character.
It's true.
Doesn't matter if they're an anti-hero or not. If you spend that time viewing what they go through in their shoes, it makes you a lot more open.
Yeah.
Even if they're completely in the wrong. It's the same thing with like Breaking Bad arguments.
Yeah, Breaking Bad, or even more a very popular one is Thanos. Like people like, he was just kind of an offshoot character for, a big bad in the background for a while, and then you get Thanos, so you get like this POV of what Thanos is up to, and you're kind of like, like, could he be right? And you're like, no, that's genocide. Like you're like, still genocide. And they made that joke, but like, it's, like, no, Thanos, that's still genocide. Like, and I feel like even taking that time to spend with him and kind of seeing what he's doing is makes you kind of empathize with him in a little ways, even if you don't.
You're wrong, but I see how you got there.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You're wrong, but I see how you got there. I feel like that happens with the Joker, with Fight Club. You know, like you're kind of like you're wrong, but I see how you got there, and that's why I feel like there's all that toxic bro feelings around movies like mob movies, like the Joker. You know, like
and in turn it not only breeds that, but it also in turn breeds people's belief that the filmmakers or creators or writers believe what they're trying to tell a story about.
Yeah,
like I've made the joke before that, like, I swear, do some of you people just need a huge disclaimer at the beginning of every movie? It's just like, the writers do not condone the actions of these characters we've created. Because I swear to God.
Swear to God. Because it's one of those things that I feel like it's the media literacy argument. We always bring it up that like media literacy has gone down the tubes. And I feel like a lot of people watch movies and maybe it's their first time watching a bunch of movies and they're like connecting with these characters for the first time, and that's where they got misled, you know, like
or watching anything from the first time that's not fluff.
Yes, exactly. Because I feel like, you know, a lot of people are used to Marvel where, you know, like it's fun, it's exciting, you know, like, and I'm not saying Marvel is
and if
just
you
fluff.
Put it in the perspective of a kid who's only grown up with that being the only thing they like go out of their way to see in theaters, it makes them think that's the only type of movie there is.
So, and I feel like I love Goodfellas, but there's a lot of, you know, toxic bro itty going around this Fight Club, and it's strictly because they empathize with the characters that we are following, even though these characters are, like I said earlier, villains, you know, like straight up bad guys. And like, and a lot of people are like, wow, I can't believe they're empathizing with a bad guy. And you're like, yo, this is a very famous literary device, you know, like this has been happening since fucking Shakespeare, you know, following a villain, you know, like, and seeing his side of what he's doing, you know, like this is not new, but if it's their first, like all the people who are really into Scarface, it's like one of those things where it's like, it's their first very serious, you know, look at crime, you know, crime movies. And it's like, and that's what they just, it's so exciting that they kind of like take it as like, this is the greatest thing that's ever fucking happened, you know, like, and then they run with it instead of watching more movies and more movies like it to see, you know, what are those movies like and what's happening, and maybe have some context and you know, like actual, like what's happening in these narrative devices, you know, like it does happen a lot. And I feel like I love Goodfellas, but it is looked around as like the film bro movie in a lot of ways, you know, same as like Fight Club, where people are like, oh yeah, I love that movie, that's why I got into filmmaking, you know, like, and I'm the same way, so I can't fucking talk, but like I do know that these aren't the guys you want to be, you know, and that's the main
it's in the same way that like you and I like Zack Snyder's like work a lot of the time, not always, but not a lot of the time, but we have to clarify that we're not nuts.
Yes, like I'm not sitting there being like Rebel Moon is the greatest thing in Star Wars, and I still haven't watched part 2, but part 1 is such a fucking mess that I have to, you know, you have to call it on its bullshit. And I feel like Army of the Dead is way better than Rebel Moon, you know, like, and but Army of the Dead is still not Zack Snyder at his best either, you know, like I feel like there's, you know, you got to make those distinctions.
And there's also that like, don't listen to the vocal minority as well.
Yes,
like it's very easy to avoid the toxic section of anything, whether it be in fandoms or the way people like follow movies or anything or any sort of entertainment. Like I have this discussion constantly with my friends of just like, you guys really determine what you want to watch, like show wise, because of a fandom being annoying.
Right?
Like,
you're just like,
you really giving the fandom that much power that it determines what you want to enjoy.
Right. I mean, to bring it to Gundam, I'll like, a lot of people hate on Gundam Seed, and Mobile Suit Gundam Seed. And like, one of those things is that I don't like the original series, but I think that everything that has come afterward has really, you know, evolved and does its own thing, and like Stargazer and the newest movie. And I think that there's a lot to like in Seed, but the thing is that there's this huge minority that is yelling that they hate this thing. They think it's real bad. But Gundam Seed is the number one selling Gundam series. Number one. It sells so much fucking merch in Japan. Like, if you're looking, Gundam is one of the highest selling series. It's in the top 10 of like merch and sales and all that. Like, literally 50% of it is Gundam Seed. Like, yeah, well, it's crazy.
It's sort of like the argument of like the James Cameron Avatar movies.
Yes.
Where it's just like, oh, second one will never do well. It's had no cultural significance. No one ever talks about it anymore. No one even cares. And then when the second one came out and made fucking bank, they're like, what? Yeah.
What? I would even say it goes to our last review about Godzilla. Everyone's hating on Godzilla X Kong and being like, oh, no, it's just a popcorn movie. It's not that good. I don't like the way Godzilla looks in it.
Shin Godzilla and -1 are the only two Godzilla movies I've ever seen, so everything needs to be that.
The number one grossing Godzilla movie of all time. Surpassed even Godzilla 2014. It fucking smashed it, and it's still going. Like, this is... It's like, yes, you can hate on it, but obviously the majority of people are like, fuck yeah, you know? Like,
and you have to remember that, like, social media, especially Twitter, is not the conversation. Yes. That is not a reflection of what the general public likes.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that is so apparent with the new Godzilla movie. You're like,
there have been statistics about how, like, one, not every country has like internet or are terminally online, and two, amongst that bubble of people who even have access to it, I think there's a percentage of like less than 5% of people even use Twitter,
right?
And we treat it like it's news.
Yeah, I feel like I mean, it came out this week that YouTube is on the ratings charts. Like, if we're talking like streaming rating charts, YouTube is one of the most watched services on people's TVs at an astounding, I think it was 16%. I could be wrong, but that is smashing like Paramount's 10%, or like anybody, or Max. It smashes Max. And like Disney Plus isn't doing as well as you'd think. YouTube is smashing these people. And I think
same way that like shows like Yellowstone are huge fucking shows because it's all the people still on cable like watching it who don't care about following trends.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, people on Twitter may not be talking about Yellowstone, but it's found its audience. It's just the people who don't care to post about shit.
Yes, exactly. And I'm not condoning Yellowstone because it is, it's not, from what I've seen, it's not very good. But I get why people like it. You know, like I see people being like, why they fall in love with it. You know, like, and that's the thing about the media literacy. Is you have to understand why people like these things instead of just going into all-out hate mode. What the fuck, you know? Like, you know,
it's
like
bad.
That is,
it's like, well, why didn't you like it? Because it sucked.
Because it sucked. You're like, okay, why? You know, like, and yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have to explain.
There's a more nuanced conversation. Like in the same way that, like, you know, horror is its own bubble.
Yes,
like someone could tell me, it's just like, oh, the Friday the 13th movies are all just like poorly made trash. And I'll be like, yeah, I love it.
Yes. And that's why here's my ranking of all the movies.
And here's why it's peak entertainment.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like same thing happens for anime where you'll hear all the time, this is peak anime or this is peak fiction. And you're like, I haven't even heard of this fucking thing, you know, like, and I'm in the anime sphere, you know, like I'm a big Gundam guy. I hear constantly about other anime, but then you'll be like, oh yes, Frieren is the new peak anime. And you're just like,
Frieren's really fucking good though.
I hear it's good. I'm not shitting on it. But it's funny because I understand. I think outside of the bubble, no one would even know what that is. You know, like people know more about Kaiju number 8 than they know about that show. You know, like, and I know some people have been hating on Kaiju number 8. You know, like, and I bought the first couple books of the book when it was coming out.
It's the same thing.
Like, but
anime is bigger than just the shonen genre, but the shonen genre is the most
is huge.
Popular thing. It's in the same way that like comics are more than just superheroes, but those are the money makers. Those are the big two.
Exactly. So, guys, I'm pretty sure you got what our feelings on Goodfellas and why you should have it on your shelf. You should absolutely own Goodfellas. I think. Deshaun, do you agree?
I do. Yeah. I say hypocritically as I don't own either.
But you should. You should.
Yeah, and I've been meaning to.
I as somebody who loves Martin Scorsese, I've bought like big collections of Martin Scorsese, and I think people should do that also. You know, you should see his other things.
I don't think I have any Blu-ray for Scorsese. I'm thinking about it.
Oh shit.
That must be remedied. That must be corrected.
Yes, must be fixed.
I'm pretty sure I don't think I have anything.
I don't think there's any reason to try to rate these movies when they're already on the top AFI 100. That kind of sums up that these are peak movies, you know, in a lot of ways. And
I mean, part of the reason I've like,
we'd be talking about it.
Part of the reason I've like moved away from ratings a lot of the time when I talk about things is because people focus too much on the number. Yeah, like I've had conversations with this with friends where like you ignore everything I've just said about this nuanced conversation, and it just turns into like, but you gave this a this when you gave that a that,
7, and you gave this an 8. You know, like
it's ridiculous.
It's literally that Twitter that is just like, it's just called IGN thinks this is better than Fortnite because they gave Fortnite a 9, and if anything's better than it, they'll like say it, and they're always just like, Chris, they think, you know, Interstellar is worse than Fortnite, you know, like, you know, like they'll like throw shit like that out there, and you know,
it's like that. Like, God, Twitter users like do not let things go.
No,
it's just like that poor girl from that one reaction video. The like, this is why I hate video games. It appeals to the male fantasy. That woman has gone on to do like so much other stuff. Like she's written books and stuff like that. And anytime she posts anything on social media, you just get a fucking flood of like, but does it represent a male fantasy?
Yeah, they never.
And you're like, oh God. And we're so many years removed from that too. And they just refuse to let it go.
The meme never dies. That's the real issue. The meme never
dies. Meme will never die.
I mean, I did think it was funny though. Speaking of memes, Casino, I never knew what the like look at making Joe Pesci look at something was from. You know, like you know. Like
oh yeah.
Me breaking.
I remember when that was
spaghetti. Around. And it's from Casino, and I remember I was watching it earlier, and I was like, oh shit, it's the meme. You know, like I was like, oh shit, there it is. More media literacy is needed for that. Even I need to up my media literacy because I was so like, oh shit, it's the meme. You know, like and that, you know, big hole.
It's so funny how long it took you to watch Casino when you owned it for so long.
I know, it was one of those things that I owned. It was just like, I own it, so fuck it, you know. Like I'll definitely
get around to it eventually.
Eventually,
you had that DVD when I met you.
Yeah, seriously. Because literally one of my high school girlfriends was like, oh man, you're such a big Godfather and Goodfellas fan. You got to watch Casino. It's one of my family's favorite movies. She gave me the DVD. I've owned that DVD forever, just not watching it, just sitting on it. And thank God, I've finally seen it. And I don't like it as much as Goodfellas, but I don't.
Neither do I. But it's
but
it is very strong, despite its issues. Like there is a lot of like info dumping at the beginning, but they are trying to set some pretty complicated pieces up compared to Goodfellas. Exactly. Like they need to tell you the ins and outs of like the casino stuff before. So the rest of the movie, you're not just like, what?
Huh? What that? I feel like Scorsese learns from this, though, in like Wolf of Wall Street, where he's explaining penny stocks and stuff like that. And I feel like it moves a lot faster.
Yeah, as someone like me who doesn't understand how stocks work at all, even remotely outside of movies, it's good for me. Like, that's for dummy like me who doesn't understand that.
Yeah. And, you know, like there's movies like The Big Short that also are able to explain these big, complicated things really fast. And maybe they use Margot Robbie in a bathtub to do it, but they do it. You know, like they get it across.
I mean, there are worse things to
exposit.
It was the joke with Game of Thrones. Just like, oh, we'll watch what is basically just the West Wing in medieval drag if you put some boobies and dragons in it.
Yeah, that's fair. I feel like that's really it with House of Dragon too. It's like there's a lot of people who are into that show, and for me, I'm like, no, I'm good. Like
I'm not like rabid about it, but I did watch House of the Dragon season 1, and it was very good.
Nice. It's just one of those things where I'm like,
but I'm not trying to sell people on it because people are still so burned by the ending of the original show that I'm like, well, whatever.
I think they'll eventually, like the prequel movies, gain the audience back, like in trust, and then be able to continue on with Game of Thrones spinoffs,
and maybe even have their own fandom that like only cares about House of Dragon, really.
Right? Yeah, I think there is some people like that. I mean,
that's the benefit of doing a prequel that takes place so far behind, is that you can kind of just keep this own bubble. Just like, yeah, we all know where it ends up, but kind of like history, we can just still enjoy it.
Do it. But thank you guys for watching this. Thank you for listening to the podcast all the way through. You can listen to our podcast on any podcast platform, or if you want to see our beautiful faces, you can watch on YouTube, on the Galaxy of Geek YouTube. And you can also check out the website, galaxyofgeek.com, where you can see both versions of the podcast, all the podcast episode, articles by other nerds and geeks, and just generally, it's where we live. And if you want to support the show, all you have to do is make the algorithm move down below. May that be touching buttons or telling a friend, whatever makes the algorithm fucking move. That would be super helpful. But we kind of just love doing this. So thank you for your support, but we just like doing this. But if you want to check out our personal social medias, I am Frank on pretty much everything, or Gundam if you like Gundams, or if you like fishing, that is a mech fishing. It's Fish. So check those out.
Fool, you have to make separate accounts. I put everything on just the one. Pathetic. Yeah, I'm Mod Karaika pretty much everywhere. The most I've been up to is just continuing the media thread. I'm on 230 now.
Jesus Christ, that's crazy. That's insane, my man. I mean, hats off. That is incredible. That is amazing stuff. But guys, thank you so much for listening, for supporting the show, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
We'll see you next time.
Adios.